graduate student in the museology program at UW, and I thought that this assignment would be a good chance to try to articulate my thoughts about my thesis project. So here we go. So when many people think about natural history museums, they envision life-size dinosaur models. And that's because there are about 90 museums and permanent exhibits devoted to dinosaurs in the United States. And this makes sense because if museums want to make a lot of money and draw in as many people as possible, dinosaurs are a good bet. We think they're so cool because they're incredibly old and because they look like nothing else on Earth today. But there's another group of animals that has been around for just as long as dinosaurs. And they're also incredibly unique, look like nothing else on Earth. And unlike dinosaurs, they've actually managed to survive. And those are the insects. Just to give you an idea of how common and amazing insects are, here are a few facts. For every person on Earth, there are 200 million insects. 1 square mile of rural land can hold more insects than there are people on Earth. And 1 out of every 5 animals on Earth is a beetle. But despite the fact that they're so common and so amazing, insects are actually pretty hard to come by in museums, except for the pests that eat the valuable mammal collections. There are maybe 15 or 20 permanent insect exhibits and just a small handful of insect museums in the United States. And most of the exhibits that do exist are based on university collections, which means they're pinned and labeled in this kind of traditional academic fashion, which doesn't really do much to dissolve the popular perception of insects as being creepy or boring. And it also doesn't really help ameliorate the fear that 19 million Americans have of insects. Not only are natural history museums doing a disservice to their local communities by failing to highlight these amazing species that surround us every day, but as I see it, they're also, they're missing out on a good opportunity to highlight insects, but they're also doing a disservice to their community if they're only featuring the long gone and the exotic things like dinosaurs. And this is a problem that also applies to art museums that feature great masters but overlook their up-and-coming talents in their own communities, and history museums that forget to collect everyday things like paper clips and light bulbs. And this is a problem that extends beyond the walls of the museum to a larger cultural issue. Some of you might remember reading Walter Cronon's Trouble with Wilderness. And in that essay, he talks about how we as Americans are really sentimental about the past and how much pride we have about our romantic landscapes and national parks, but how that means that sometimes we forget to think of our own homes, and especially our urban homes, as having any kind of wildness or authenticity to them. And Cronon says that this kind of attitude leads to a lack of respect and responsibility for our own environments, which are actually full of non-human life, regardless of whether we consider it to be wild. Some people like Majora Carter are initiating the kind of urban environmental care that Cronon was talking about. And to be fair, some museums are making really great efforts toward exhibiting urban wildlife in a really interesting way. The LA Natural History Museum is the only place to host a long-term urban biodiversity study. And the nature garden that you see here was built in conjunction with an indoor experimental, interactive space that features urban wildlife like bugs and squirrels. And interestingly, these 2 exhibits were built at the same time as a huge new hall of dinosaurs. And the museum has a permanent insect zoo, so they're kind of covering all the bases. So I want to use my love of natural history, art, and museums to try to work with the Burke Museum to fix this problem on a small scale. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my idea for my thesis project. I've decided to start with bees because they're pretty familiar to everyone, and people aren't too likely to be freaked out by them, although some people are. But at the same time, not many people realize that there are thousands of species of local bees besides honeybees. Honeybees are actually from Europe, they're not local at all. And there are about 20,000 species of bees worldwide, so way more than I ever realized before I started this project. People also don't tend to realize how important insects are to our food supply. 1 out of every 3 bites of food we take requires insect pollination, and bees are some of the most crucial pollinators around. So my plan is to paint a series of temporary murals of bees pollinating flowers, and each mural will serve as a checkpoint on a scavenger hunt, or as I'm calling it, a forager hunt, because female worker bees forage for pollen and nectar and other rewards. And the route will lead from the Burke Museum through the U District Pea Patch, the Botany Greenhouse, and maybe 7 or 8 other sites. And as people follow the route, they'll be encouraged to take photographs of the real bees when they find them, and to upload those to inaturalist.org, which is a citizen science database for projects like this. And then back at the Burke, foragers will be given rewards in exchange for proving that they found all the sites. And their photos of bees that they've taken will be displayed in the Burke alongside a bigger exhibit about local efforts toward bee conservation and beekeeping and pollination. And so by following in the tradition of public art, I want to extend this exhibit beyond the confines of the museum, out into the community, integrating large-scale images of bees and flowers right in the midst of the real things. If Milstein was right in declaring the power of pointing at and naming a species and then taking a step back to think about how that species fits into a larger ecological community, then I think this project could succeed in emphasizing the easily overlooked living things that surround us every day and that are really important parts of our communities and of our natural history, our gardens,